This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. Good evening and welcome everyone. This is Phoenix. Hope you're doing well. It is Tuesday, April 11th, 2017. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope things are going well for you here in the northeastern United States and the mountains of Pennsylvania. It's a warm day today. It was hot. It was actually hotter today here than it was in Atlanta, Georgia. Strange weather, a lot of heat. We went from just 2-3 days ago, a couple little snow flurries actually, and now very, very warm, but some cool weather's coming in. Hope things are going well for you. Hello to everyone over in the chat room. And Kev and Johnny had a really good show on the Kev Baker Show here a moment ago on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeart Radio, or where you might be listening, wherever you are, make it TFR. Fantastic. Very interesting stuff about aliens and alien abductions. Oh, yeah. That reminded me, I want to let everyone know, Ney Say is going to be joining me here in just a moment, just for a little while this evening. He's got some busy things. He's got an announcement about a guest we have coming on Thursday. We'll talk about that. But just want to let you know, listening to Kev's show about alien abductions, etc., reminded me to tell you that we have Dr. Stanley Meyer is going to be returning to Phoenix Rising Radio here soon. And if you're not familiar with Dr. Meyer, he's a extremely well-known researcher in the field of UFOs. And he has been for many decades, very well respected and well written. And oh my goodness, has probably been interviewed on more television programs and radio programs concerning UFOs than probably anyone. Oh yeah. You name it, he's been there. But Dr. Stanley Meyer will be joining us. He was with us a few months ago. It was a very nice program. We're talking about Flatwoods Monster and other sightings, etc. We'll let you know when he's coming in. Also, Anthony Patch of TFR fame, he's going to be joining us right here on Phoenix Rising Radio on the 27th of April, Thursday, April 27th, and that should be a very good show. We'll be talking about a lot of things, nanotechnology, CERN, different things that are coming up, and you want to be sure and mark your calendar because that'll be a good show. And we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. But right now, we have Ney Say joining us. How's it going, brother? And how are things going out there in Native American land? Ney Say, are you there? I don't know where he's at. Hang on here. Let me see if we still have him on our feed. He's still on our feed, and for some reason, he is not coming on.
I think I'm on now.
You're on now. Where were you? Could you hear us? Were you?
I was
Were you
caught in the void.
caught?
Me and the kids were playing with some magnets today and dealing with some field modalities and different type of field manipulations. And like CERN, we created a little rip in the time-space continuum, and it just sucked me in it. And so it was a little challenging because I forgot to put the breadcrumbs down, but I found my way back.
Yeah, I tell you what. That's interesting. I saw some chatter the other day about people missing time, gaining time, losing time, etc. on their watches. It's very strange about clocks resetting, and that actually happened to me not long ago. Maybe, oh my gosh, 4 weeks ago. I looked down at my watch, and I thought, oh wow, my battery must be bad in my watch because I had lost like 4 hours of time. And I reset it, and it's fine. It never had another problem. So in one day, my watch actually lost like 4 hours. I have no idea why. And we also had a clock here, a wind-up clock. Real fans of wind-up clocks that was continually gaining 20 minutes. I thought, well, there's a way to adjust this, and I'll do that. But it just stopped. It just stopped gaining the time, and now it's keeping perfect time. Very weird stuff. Anyway, how's it going out there? What's going on?
I had that same experience happen to me at one point when, now, as most people may know, I am Native American, and I do have my pedigree, my number, just like when they numbered the Jews, they numbered us also. And we have our reservation/concentration camps. But my elder that gave me my name in a traditional manner, he died. And when he died, we were to drive to the funeral. And our alarms did not go off. And we woke up literally an hour and 45 minutes late. And we got on the road, and we were barely speeding. And it was like, the whole thing was just to show up on time or just to show up to be there because we knew we were going to be late. And so we're heading there, and I'm, thinking of my elder, and we get there, and we get there 40 minutes before the funeral starts. And we had to drive 4 hours. And somehow we gained almost 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Wow, that's bizarre.
And me and my ex could not explain it, and it was the weirdest thing because there's no way we should have been there on time.
That's bizarre. Yeah, time bending. I saw a little clip from Doctor Who. You ever watch Doctor Who from the BBC? And it's one of the newer episodes of Doctor Who.
Exterminate.
Yeah, exactly. And Doctor Who was talking from like in the 60s to somebody on a television, and they were like, they couldn't understand it. And he said, I'm a time traveler, and you have my time machines there, and you need to get it. And he was trying to explain time to them. He said, time's not really linear. It's more of a ball of wibbly wobbly time stuff, like in a ball that can move around. And it's just a funny way he said that, but that's the way it is too, And I don't know if you heard me announce, I got Anthony Patch will be coming on a couple weeks here. That ought to be fun. Anthony's never been on the program before, but I think we'll have a blast with that. He was talking about some nanotech and some different things, CERN, and different topics on Kev Baker the other night. And I've got some theories on this too. But anyway, Anthony will grace us with his presence on the 27th. Now, we have a special guest again coming on. And why don't you tell everybody who that is and when that will be?
Well, for those of you that we unfortunately, due to challenges, and we found out it was beyond our control, so that's always good to know when we make mistakes, and we have minimal responsibility with that mistake. But Mr. Alex Whiteplume has rescheduled and confirmed, and this Thursday, there go before the grace, or however it goes. If the powers that should not be will allow it to occur, then Mr. Alex Whiteplume will be joining us. Actually, I will be in his presence and this is the first time that I will meet him. And I've known him since 2004, and we've been in communique and back and forth on the phone. But this is going to be the actual first time that we get to meld minds, because I'm bringing him my concept that I call the cannabis res solution, kind of a slang word that Native people call the reservations, is the res, R-E-Z. And so in 2004, I gave a 2.5-hour presentation to my tribal council and explained to them about how cannabis would save the conditions on the reservations for a better future. And I mean, if you just look at what Colorado has done in the last, and we've discussed this before, and everybody knows I can go on forever when it comes to cannabis, but Colorado, in the last 6 years since their legalization of cannabis on the modalities that they're doing, they've made $8 billion.
Oh yeah, it is a huge boon to the revenue, tax revenue of the state. It promotes new businesses. See, because a lot of people, there's so many misconceptions about cannabis, and people don't realize the industrial uses, the medicinal uses, all the different uses for animals, feed, for human beings that are available there, and how this can really turn things around. Everybody talks about green technology, green building, green that. You can't get any greener than the green leaf. I mean, it's true. It's as green as green can be, and it's, they tout bamboo like, oh, bamboo is a totally quickly renewable green resource, and switch over to bamboo instead of woods. Well, you know what? Bamboo takes a whole lot longer to grow to become to the point where they can harvest it than it does with cannabis. That's a one-season plant. Boom, it's up. And if you have the varieties, some of the varieties that they use for the fiber for the actual hemp clothing, hemp rope, etc., some of those varieties, Ney Say, those things are like 12 or 14 foot tall, man. They can get really high.
18.
18, okay.
18 feet is how high a cannabis sativa plant could possibly get.
Yeah, it's amazing.
18 feet. And then also, because when they grow it in an industrial aspect, they're grown in rows in super dense formation where every inch is a cannabis plant. And so what it does, it creates a shade underneath it. So it kills everything underneath it. So like all your weeds and everything. So it's a natural herbicide.
Go
Go ahead, sir.
Now, I'm going to say that reminds me of the planting technique of the Three Sisters. I've never done one myself. I had a friend who did it, but his goats used to get in and eat it. But if people aren't familiar with this, it's a method of farming that the Native Americans taught to the settlers when they came here, and it's called the Three Sisters. And what they would do is take a mound of dirt and build up a mound, and in the center of the mound they would plant 6 or 7 corn plants. And when these corn plants would get up about a foot tall, then they would plant all around the corn plants on the outside of this little hill. And the hill of dirt would be like 2.5, 3 feet around and maybe like 12 inches high. And so they would put around that, they would put beans. And then after the beans came up around the outer edge, they would put squash. And what would happen is they would have these things in grid patterns, like 4 feet apart, like in square grids. And the corn would grow up, of course, straight. Oh, let me go back. The very first thing they would do after they put the mound of dirt up, they would put a fish inside of it. So they'd put a fish in there for nutrients. And then the corn would grow up using the fish for nutrients, etc., and all the other plants would. But then the beans would use the corn stalks as poles. So the beans would climb up the corn stalks, and it would actually help the beans grow up and get sun and support themselves. And the beans would help the corn also and prevent it from blowing over in the wind. And then the squash would go out across the ground with the big broad leaves and kill all the weeds. So you had, and they all benefited from one another. They coexisted very well, and you had a very good planting crop of corn, beans, and squash. And again, yeah, I thought about that when you're talking about the natural shade that it would provide, because that's what the squash leaves would do, and it was a natural form of gardening. Sometimes I think we've become too smart for ourselves, because the very things that were achieved by our forefathers, naturally, we try to do chemically, and we mess everything up, man. Bad.
Well, and that's where it goes into this whole quantifying challenge, excuse me, because as silly humans, we want to count beans. We want to count. At some point, we want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, a second, a minute, an hour, a day, or this is 2 feet long, or you owe me 5 rubles or shekels or dollars. We count, and that's our downfall, because Mother Nature doesn't count. Mother Nature just is. She's a total, absolute hippie, all the way barefoot, sundress. That's it. Simple. She's not walking around with a calculator and tattoos and piercings and combat boots, and she just is. And it's funny because you bring that up. The Native Americans, people always think that they were just nomadic wanderers, that they would just walk and walk and walk and then we'll stay here for a day, but they had different camps that during different times of the year they went to, because they like to live in synchrony or in a symbiotic relationship with their community or surroundings. They didn't care to stay in one place too long to where they would eventually start polluting where they live. It's that adage, don't excrement where you eat.
So true. And a lot of people didn't realize that the Native American culture here in North America was greater than what people realized. They had trading trails, 5 primary paths that came up through where we live right now. I'm just literally not far from one of the primary paths right here. And, these trails went all the way south up into Canada. They went to the coast. They went out west, and they were the war paths, the trading trails, the Indian Path Road, all these different paths that they use. And I do know that the Native Americans in this area in the summer, they would travel. They would go towards the shore sometimes for fishing, and they would pack up and go, but it was like a summer vacation type thing. And also, we have one area around here that has an island on it down by Penns Creek, and it was rife with game, and it was so famous for abundant game is that Native Americans from Canada would actually travel down in the summertime, hunting parties, and they would come down and hang out and hunt and fish on this island down here near Penns Creek in the Susquehanna River. So there was a lot of trade going on, a lot of moving around. It was a real culture. Yeah, they had some warring that went on and stuff, but a lot of trade, more than people realize. And so, even there's evidence of some of that trade stretched down through into the South Americas. And there has been evidence of that here in North America.
There's evidence that some of the copper that was mined by the Ojibwe people around the Great Lakes area made its way to Egypt with the Phoenician trade. But the other thing, going back to the misconception of people thinking that the Native Americans were, mentally not there with their intellect, think of the physics that is entailed in making a bow and arrow. You have to have your arrow has to be straight, your feathers have to be put on a certain way, your arrow tip has to be tied on so it does a particular spin while it's in the air, and then your bow has to be so tight, and you have to have so much force and such an angle, and then you have to deal with the wind. That's all physics. So that's not just simpletons.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, there's a lot more going on there than people realize. I'm kind of scanning down through the.
And here's
through
a segue for you. And
Okay.
the very first known biological and chemical warfare was in the United States. The diseased smallpox blankets that were given to the indigenous people by the government.
Oh yeah.
And so, what's going on in Russia? In
Oh
Syria?
man, I tell you what, Tillerson. I'm watching everything. Putin has come out and basically said that it was a false flag. That this chemical attack was unproven. That's they wouldn't even, no investigation happened. Just this bombing. But unusual things are happening. We have people in the administration at some level saying one thing and then others saying another thing. Like you have Trump and Spicer. They're pretty close on. What President Trump says, Spicer says in his press things to the White House press briefings. Then you have people like Nikki Haley of the United Nations and Tillerson say something totally opposite. And what it's doing is it's sending a very, very mixed message. And what we have here, we have Tillerson is headed to Russia. I believe he's there right now, as a matter of fact. If not, he will be there real soon. And he's supposed to be meeting, I don't believe he's going to meet with Putin, but he will be speaking to Lavrov, which is his counterpart, like his equal there in Russia. And I don't know how it's going to go because Tillerson's saying some pretty crazy stuff. He's trying to say that the chemical attack, which I'm going to say is alleged, because again, there's a lot of evidence that potentially what was struck was a chemical warfare holding facility or manufacturing thing of the rebels. And, the so-called evidence has never been brought forward. So there was never an investigation and things moved really quickly. Now, remind everyone that there were allegations of chemical attacks in the past by the Assad regime, and they were proven to not be true. They were proven by the United Nations themselves with their investigations that it was the rebels and not the Syrian military. And again, I'm not defending Assad in any way or anything about him. I'm just talking about the realities of the situation and international law. We are way too quick sometimes as a nation to do things without getting to the bottom of it. I will remind everyone of Colin Powell sitting in front of Congress with a little vial of, a little test tube of inert powder. Actually, he was talking about yellow cake uranium and all of this and the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein had. And they were stumping for the war to invade Iraq, and they did. And there was no yellow cake uranium. These weapons of mass destruction that they said were there didn't exist. They did not exist. So there's a lot of. Go ahead.
And that goes back to the adage of same game, different players. Same different game, same game board. And it seems like these powers that should not be have figured out what system works, and then they keep going back to it, but then they just shift it up a little bit. But I think we as the general public are either noticing it more or they're just being so sloppy that we're finding out. But it isn't.
What it is, Ney Say, is the internet age. And the fact that people have Twitter, they have Facebook, they have and YouTube, and there's so many people out there investigating things, and you can get things almost real time. We do a lot of research and we watch a lot of stuff. Dude, I see live battles happening in Ukraine. I can find feeds of this. I can find live footage from Syria going in real time. And they know this. And there's a group there in Syria, they call them the, quote, white helmets. And they've been proven by like a team of Swedish doctors and stuff to be totally fake. They are actually, they are said to be a media arm or psychological warfare arm of Al-Qaeda. And they have like these productions they do and everything, these white helmets. And allegedly that's where some of the quote unquote proof comes from, and they are agents for Al Qaeda actually, and put out this stuff. So the reason they're saying that possibly this attack happened so quickly was that they didn't want to allow it to happen what happened before, that it was disproved. And so there's a lot of heat. I mean, Putin is actually saying he came out and claimed that it was a false flag attack. And now Tillerson, here's the danger in all this. Tillerson is coming out saying that Russia is as guilty in this, quote, attack, unquote, as Syria. And I don't know. I mean, they're using some pretty strong verbiage here and pushing the limits really hard here. So, everyone must remember that we are not legally in Syria in any way, shape, or form. The Russian government is there because they were allies with Syria. They had been for decades. And they were invited there to help fight the terrorists and the rebels that were trying to take down the regime. So they were asked to be there. They're legally there. We are not. We have troops in Syria right now, and we did not have permission from Syria to be there. We don't have permission from the United Nations to be there, and we don't even have permission from the United States Congress to be there. Whenever President Trump ordered this attack, some people on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, jumped up and said, whoa, that's an illegal action. You have to notify Congress 48 hours in advance. So there's a lot of stuff going on now. Before we go into the break here, a couple other things I want to touch on that are hot. There are some rumors that we are ready to attack North Korea, and the battle group that we have headed there right now should be there within 48 hours. And there's some very strong rumor on that also, and that could be really, really difficult. You know what I mean?
Right, but the scary part about it is that when it comes to strategy, you don't want to show your cards. You want to keep your hands up to your desk. So is it just a front that they're going?
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Alrighty, we're back. And before we went to the break, we were talking a little bit about what's going on in the world, current events, etc. The entire Korean thing, we touched upon that a little bit. Korea has come out, of course, very boisterous way and said that if the United States fleet that's coming acts in a threatening way or makes threatening provocations towards North Korea, they will attack with a nuclear weapon. They've said these things before, but you know what? The problem, and here's the problem with attacking Korea, Ney Say, they aren't just like a nation that's very isolated, kind of like Syria, if you will. Syria doesn't really have any big major issues with its neighbors. I mean, Israel comes in, does bombing runs on Hezbollah and stuff, but with North Korea, they have tens of thousands of pieces of artillery, heavy, high caliber artillery, aimed at the capital of South Korea, Seoul. And it's been estimated that if indeed they went to war, they would unleash a barrage, a nonstop barrage from thousands of pieces of artillery onto Seoul, Korea, the capital, and could potentially, within 1 month's time, there could be up to 2 million casualties. And see, that's a problem. So if we attack North Korea and they let loose on something, they feel like there's no way out, I think they're going to go full on crazy. And they're going to unleash artillery barrages, naval attacks. They may even launch some nuclear missiles. And that's a problem.
You know, when I first learned about my Gulf War illness and that, and when I was there in Kuwait, and we were told that we were there to liberate Kuwait, and then we were escorting oil tankers. You know, and you would think if you were liberating a people, you would be escorting people and not oil. And then we get back, and then I get sick, and then I find out that it's kind of like a fascist system where we're just placating to the businesses, and oil is big business. Then you find out about the Bush family and their involvement with oil, and the bin Laden family in Saudi Arabia, and this, that, and the other thing. And then you learn as a veteran, why are we going to war? Why are we as individuals making this ultimate oath of saying we're going to lay down our lives for this principle that we were conditioned to believe? Stand and salute the flag, say your Pledge of Allegiance. It was a proud thing as a Native American and as American to join the military. And then you find this out. So when I learned all of that, I started looking into war and why did they happen and what was the initiation or the spark, you know. And then as you learn of all of these sparks and you learn about the Reichstag building and you learn about in Vietnam and the gunboats and the Gulf of Tonkin, then you learn about the what was the big ocean ship, the Lusitania. Lusitania. And you start looking at this, and then you look at the Korean War, and then you start looking at the underbelly of it all, you know, like the truth movement or the unknown truth, I guess you could say. And then you find out that at one point the United States told Korea, look at your river system. You see this main river that runs right through the whole country of Korea? If you continue this ridiculousness, all we will do is poison this river, and it will wipe out North Korea. And from that point on, North Korea was like, oh, you know, it's the big stick theory.
Yeah.
It's, you know, whoever has the biggest stick. And at some point, you know, whether it's Jesus comes down from the heavens or aliens come down from the heavens, I hope they don't have the same mentality that the powers that shouldn't be when they shake their big stick, because we're going to be in trouble. Because are we guilty as Americans when we go and make our purchases for gasoline and for clothing and for everything? There's a little thing that says state tax and federal tax. And right now those tax dollars have been used to purchase bombs that have now been dumped on people, and how many innocent people were killed.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's a big question a lot of people have. You know, will we be held accountable for our rulers because of the action of our rulers? And I don't think so. I think we're all, you know, we will be judged individually. And you know, we're talking about the big stick. If Christ returns, hey, Christ is returning with a sword. He is returning with a sword, and that's interesting. I'm going to have someone on here very soon. I'm still working on it, so I don't want to announce it yet, who is going to be talking about Armageddon and the tribulation and all these things. He's got some interesting theories. I have some myself that our listeners have heard, but he will be on. I'll announce that. That'll be a really good one. But, you know, I think individually we will not be held accountable for that. As a nation, nations do get judged. You know, and the big questions like, where is America in prophecy? And where are they? You know, some people say, oh, it's here. But I don't know, man. It's almost like it's suspiciously not there. So there are a lot of theories on why that could be, too. But, you know, getting back to this North Korea thing, just yesterday in California, they were a lot of people were pretty freaked out because the United States military was scanning the area right off the coast, and it came out that they were looking for a foreign submarine that had been detected in the waters right off the coast of California. And with all of this stuff going on with North Korea, the threats, and North Korea does have submarines. They're older models, but they do have submarines. So they were actively looking for a foreign nation submarine that was caught operating in the waters right off California last night. And so there's a lot going on in the world right now, and a lot of powder kegs. Some people are saying it. They're kind of shocked because they did not think Trump would be so quick on the trigger with warfare. But then again, have you ever seen the comedian Bill Hicks? He's dead. He's no longer with us. Bill Hicks
if anybody got shot with the cancer gun, it was Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks. Yeah, Bill Hicks, man, he had a way of telling the truth. And he would go on stage. If our listeners aren't familiar with him, you search it. But Bill Hicks had one routine where he talked about presidents. He said he was almost pretty certain that the way it happened was after someone got elected. They went there, they were going to do good, they were going to take care of things and change everything, but they were brought into a back, dark, smoky room that had all these industrialists and stuff that actually got them elected. And some big guy with smoking a cigar and puffing a cigar said, lower the screen. And the screen comes down. He's like, roll the film. And all of a sudden was a film. And the new president-elect was watching in this dark, smoky room. And it was the JFK assassination. But it wasn't just the JFK assassination. It was a version of the film that no one's ever seen. And it seemed to appear that it was taken from the grassy knoll and boom.
Angle 3.
Angle 3. And then the lights would go on and these dark figures would say, so, any questions? And the new president-elect would say, no, so what's my agenda? And it was, right. Many a truth is said in jest. And, it's interesting. Just yesterday, Lake, my wife, and I were talking about Ross Perot. Now, you remember Ross Perot? He was this third candidate that came in, during the Clinton election years ago. And he was kind of an outsider business guy, kind of like a smaller version, literally, in stature, too, of Donald Trump. He was like a Texas, oil man or whatever. I forget exactly what he did.
Now, I want y'all to take a look at this chart here. I got this chart here that's going to show how I'm going to make things better. And I got this chart here. He loved charts, remember?
Loved charts. And he got NAFTA right. He said, if Bill Clinton's elected, you're going to hear a huge sucking sound. He goes, and that's going to be all the jobs sucked out of the United States down into Mexico. And he was right. Well, people used to make fun of him for saying that, but he was right. But what happened? So if some of our listeners aren't familiar with this, it's kind of some older politics. Ross Perot drastically changed. He stopped with the charts, his demeanor changed, and people were wondering, and it got to the point he just wasn't talking much, and he basically dropped out of the race, and he finally made the statement that his family's life had been threatened, and that someone had made threats on the life of his daughter, who was getting married, and his family. And he was very upset.
Mr. Beale, you are messing with the primordial emotion in the movie Network.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, if you find Chris Geo's music, he has some great, I think it's called Trouble. And he has little experts of Beale in his rants in the movie Network, which are so critical to today.
Oh, I know.
Absolutely critical, especially when you talk about the fake news and how media and the powers that shouldn't be utilized media and the news to sway the opinion of people.
Not only sway the opinion of people, but make things go away. I will remind everyone listening to me right now that last week, the big topics were leaks in the White House, unmasking of names, Susan Rice at a high level. Who did she get this information from? Who told her to unmask? Was it the Attorney General Loretta Lynch? Was it President Barack Obama himself? Was Hillary Clinton involved? Oh, now it's disclosed that Hillary Clinton was part of these briefings. All of that, we're talking major scandal and possible treasonous acts, sedition, all kinds of crazy things, and things were being said, and then the whole thing with Trump and all of this. Yeah, exactly. And it's gone.
Don't talk about it.
Don't talk about it.
You know, it
Yeah.
really scares me. Remember James Bond? I used to love, Sean Connery. I mean, the dude was so suave, except now looking back, he was a chauvinistic pig. But just the whole idea. And, excuse me, my biggest fear is the Spectre group, that there's these rich elitists that they gotten so frustrated that they can't control the politician anymore, that they bought an old sub and painted it to look like the Koreans. And they said, hey, just float it outside, California. Let's see if we can initiate, like Charlie Manson.
Oh, yeah.
How he wanted to start the revolution, supposedly.
Well,
Mind
dude,
control.
there was just came out. I forget where it was at. Oh, they were filming. The United States was painting planes to look like Russian planes, and everybody's like, "What? What are they doing?" That's probably like OP4 exercises. I don't know, but suspicious things like that come up, and you wonder what are they doing and why are they doing that? Because that's how they do this. If you could paint an aircraft and make it very noticeable, look like another nation's aircraft, and fly it low and slow over an area where everybody's got an iPhone and a camera and they're filming this stuff, you could really create quite an illusion, if you will. And that's true. You're talking about your greatest fear. They do this stuff. You were talking about the Gulf of Tonkin earlier. I mean, this is known, the whole false flag thing and false news. This is truly how the few control the many, and it's been done for generations and from as long as there's been rulers. So the question is, how do we deal with all this, and what potentials do we have here? Now, I personally believe what we're looking at is they have to make an excuse for the death of the dollar, because the petrodollar system is done, baby. It's over. Russia and China are going to be trading with their own currencies. Other nations are doing this. The entire battle for the petrodollar is failing. And it's getting to the point it's going to get critical. On the 28th, we have Congress right now in the United States are on vacation. They're on recess for Easter, I guess, and spring recess, they call it, whatever. They'll be back on the 24th. Well, on the 28th, we reach the last day that we're able to borrow money from the Federal Reserve. That is our debt ceiling limit is April 28th. And we just have a few $1 billion in the coffers. And if the debt ceiling is not raised or they don't extend it with an emergency measure, we will be out of money as a nation by August. Some people say by July. Now, the dollar is failing and it has to be replaced. But they just can't come in and say, ladies and gentlemen, you can't have Donald Trump get up and say, ladies and gentlemen of America, I hate to inform you, but the Federal Reserve System that was started over 100 years ago on Jekyll Island is a scam. It's a pyramid Ponzi scheme that was initiated by the guys of some crooked senators and congressmen in the United States in the dead of the night in December when everyone was gone. And it was destined to fail. And they knew it wouldn't fail until they were long gone. But now it has failed, and the whole house of cards coming down, so we're devaluing the U.S. dollar. They can't do that. They can't tell the truth. They can't talk about how Nixon took us off the gold standard and what happened and violated the Bretton Woods Agreement. They can't go into that and say, you know what, we're all crooked, and the entire system's crooked, and you're screwed. So what they have to do, they have to do something to make it look like it's not their fault. Now, what's the greatest way that a nation's value of their currency can fall off the cliff? The quickest way? The appearance of a major military setback. That would do it. And I'm talking about a World War II type setback, something major. So I believe we might be watching a scenario being played out now. It's all theatrics, and I believe it's all staged, even what we saw in Syria, what we see in North Korea. But they're going to stage something that will make it appear that the United States has fallen victim to some heinous, horrible act. And because of this heinous and horrible act and this major setback, the nations of the world are going to be dumping the U.S. dollar, and the value of the dollar is going to plummet and cause a crisis. And that way they can blame it on evil Russia, evil Iran, or evil North Korea, all this horrible thing. So that way it's not Congress's fault, it's not Senate's fault, it's not the president's fault, it's not the Federal Reserve's fault, which it actually has all the above. But this way they can blame it on somebody else, and everyone will understand why the value of the dollar went down. It'll be conceivable. Oh, I understand why this is happening. This major, horrible military thing just happened to us. Now, of course, they can't just let it crash and go away. They're going to have to replace it with something, and that's when they'll come in with some type of new reserve currency for the world, the SDR or whatever. And I think we're watching a major theatrical production right now, put on by the elite, and that is the desired end result, is to replace the United States dollar with a new system, maybe some treasury note or whatever, and
The
our dollar.
Amero?
Possibly the Amero, possibly something like that. So I don't know, but I think that's what we're seeing.
Didn't Mexico and Canada already, Bush's vice president,
Cheney?
oh my God, I can't, Cheney. Yeah. Didn't Cheney already have some type of monetary agreement done up with Mexico and Canada?
Oh yeah, that's for the Amero. As a matter of fact,
was it the Amero though?
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was. I don't know if they discussed specifically the Amero, but they talked about in the event of, like, it was some kind of agreement. I'm going off the top of my head now, but it was an agreement that they all agreed that if America imploded, basically, I'm paraphrasing, if America's economy imploded, it would affect Canada and Mexico greatly enough that the quickest response to get out of it would to be coming out with this common currency for all three countries. And God, this will drive me nuts. I'm going to remember it at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah, well, no, it was basically the Amero. Amero was one name for it.
Right.
Let's see, someone, as Virtue said, the gold standard, Sally. Yeah, well, that's what it is, the gold standard, of course. But I'm not so sure about the U.S. If they went with a gold standard, which Russia and China are doing, and they have brought in massive gold reserves, and the SDR has at the IMF has huge amounts of gold that they'll be including with the SDR. They would not be able to do a pure U.S. gold back. So by joining in with Canada, and Canada doesn't have any gold. Canada sold all their gold. So, but they do have some gold mines. So I don't know. I don't know how they would do this and how they would swing it, if it would be something along the North American Union or just go straight with the SDR, which would have a gold value to it. I have no idea. But the end result, what they're going for is a global currency, a one global currency. That's going to take some time. But we're part of the play right now where the entire Federal Reserve System that has failed has to be cleaned up. And I think they're going to use the military action as the cover story and provide the confusion and the explanation to everybody why the dollar has failed, even though that's not the reason. But they'll make it look that way.
If I was to throw out the crystal ball and gazing into the crystal ball or gazing into the bowl with the water in it, copper bowl, of course, like Nostradamus did, my assumption would be a computer hacking of the drone system. And some evil force is going to utilize the drones and do some kind of horrific attack in America. And because we all learned about how Obama did buy all of those drones for surveillance of America. I think it was 4,500. And then when he purchased them, he said it was only going to be for surveillance. But then when it was further scrutinized, the drones that he purchased were all the type that had the fittings to be easily converted to weaponized drones. So do
Yeah.
they have weapons on them now when they're, because up here in North Dakota, we have Grand Forks, the biggest military drone base. And that's where they're all flying from. And those drones, they can now go up into the air, and I think some of them have like a week. I'm probably exaggerating that, but they can go up there and they don't have to refuel for a while.
Oh yeah, well some of them can stay up a long time. As a matter of fact, they have one drone system that it actually can find. They locate power lines, and what happens is this thing goes in and will actually fly to like a high tension line and drape itself. The joints kind of break down on it, and it drapes over the power line and recharges itself. But it looks like a piece of debris hanging from the power line. So if you like drive by and look up and see this drone, it looks like a piece of trash, like hanging on the wire. I'm serious. They actually have this. Yeah. And then what happens is once it's charged, it receives a signal, it stiffens up, falls off the line, starts flying again. They really have those. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, even just with the Tesla, with the Tesla generators and stuff like that, where, oh my God, have you ever read Tesla when he talked about his death ray?
Oh yeah.
The guy basically wanted to. He first conceptualized creating a ring, a giant ring that would be able to go around the Earth. Sorry, flat earthers. But it could go around the Earth, and then it could be tilted this way or the other way, and then illuminated, just like the filament in a light bulb. And he claimed that he could light the world anywhere, at any time. And then further technology, he figured out he could make it militarized, and then he called it the death ray. And then he tried to give the patent or the instruction manual to the death ray to all of the countries in the world, because he was like, if all of the countries, because of course America wanted to militarize everything Tesla came out with, but Tesla was, he was a humanitarian. He was like, no, this is for the betterment of humane beings and not for figuring out how to kill each other. But yeah, it's sad, scary story where the technology that's there is so beyond what they're letting us know.
Oh yeah. You ever hear the story about his earthquake machine? He had a machine. It was pretty small. He clamped it to a steel beam in a building. Oh, I forget where his studio was. I think it was up in New Jersey or someplace when he did this. And it started to like hum and vibrate, and it started an earthquake. It actually started an earthquake, and the police came looking for it because the earth was shaking all around, and they actually located the source of it, which was Tesla's factory, and he was forced to turn it off.
Yeah, I think there was a big argument about shutting it off because they thought it got to a point of where the sudden shutting it off would be worse than letting it slowly decrease again.
Yeah.
But yeah, the gentleman was incredible. But I think I'm not going to join you the next hour, and I think we're coming up to the end of the first hour, right?
Yeah, we're about out of here. I'll see you on Thursday. And remember, everyone, we have Alex Whiteplume will be joining us on Thursday, and that should be a really good show.
And if you guys have challenges with me, send me an email, themegaphoneman, one word, @gmail.com. And let me hear your complaints, your thoughts, and your ideas, because I like to get your opinions. So thank you very much, Phoenix. Love you guys. Toodles.
You're welcome. Have a good evening, and we'll see you on Thursday. All right, everyone. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR, Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome to Phoenix Rising Radio. Now is the time to lift your mind higher. Now is the time to rise above. I am your host, Phoenix, and welcome to tonight's broadcast.
Welcome back to the second hour of Phoenix Rising Radio here on Truth Frequency Radio, where truth is premier. Are you a supporter of the truth? Do you support truth? Do you believe in the truth? Do you quest for the truth? Do you hunger for the truth? Well, we hope you do, and we hope that you support Truth Frequency Radio. You can do so by going to the listener page, Phoenix Rising Radio listener page at TFR, truthfrequencyradio.com, and find out how you can become a supporter of the truth to help myself and all the other hosts, wonderful hosts from TFR, do what we do. And I hope you do support all the other hosts and the great programming that we have here on TFR, wherever you may listen, here on Truth Frequency Radio with one of the great apps and available applications that you can get for all your devices here at TFR, or iHeartRadio, or the many other ways that you can listen. And again, we hope that you support the truth. Speaking of the truth, back at it. Let's take a look at some of the headlines that are going on here today. And if you are joining us late, when I say here today, I mean like right here. And today is April the 11th, 2017. You know, Passover started sundown last night. If you are so inclined that you celebrate and observe Passover, it will run all the way to the 18th. 17th, something interesting is happening in the world, and we've talked about this before, the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement. Let me pull up some info here, what's happening next Monday, and this will be in New York. Let me see, Lake probably has this over on Going Global, eastmeetswest.blogspot.com, and what we have is the New Silk Road and the New World Order. Now, you know, the Silk Road, which is being developed by China, we have something here. The first freight service to China leaves the UK. The first rail freight service from the UK to China departed April 10th, carrying 30 containers of British-produced goods from Stamford-le-Hope in Essex along a 7,500-mile journey to Yiwu, China. Hailed as a victory for an independent Britain, the voyage instead arguably represents a shift in the balances of the world economic powers from east to west. Thus, the name of the blog, Going Global, East Meets West. Cheaper than air and faster than sea. Along the way, the consignment will pass through the Channel Tunnel into France, into Belgium, Germany, Poland, Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, before finally reaching China on April 27th. The cargo is said to contain a number of items, including whiskey, soft drinks, vitamins, pharmaceuticals, and baby products. Now, the China Silk Road project has been ongoing for a while, and if you're not familiar with this, they have replicated and are still working on it, the old Silk Road. And the Silk Road was the ancient trade route of China that brought goods, primarily silk, gold, spices, all types of textiles and things all across Europe from China, the old Chinese Silk Road. And they have resurrected this route, and in some areas built entirely new highways going across vast areas of China, and it'll be expanded in many directions. A very heavy-duty highway, high-speed 5G internet is following it along, and this is really going to change the economic structure of Europe and Asia and the world. It truly will. But the point I was getting at was on Monday of this coming week, let me bring this article up. It doesn't look like Lake put it out. What we actually have, and we've covered this before, is the Paris Agreement. We actually have a situation where we have the Paris Agreement. It will be a high-level signing ceremony for Paris Agreement the 17th of April. It will be located at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and the high-level signing ceremony for the Paris Agreement was organized by the International Institute for Sustainable Development and Reporting Services Division, which will take place on the 17th at the UN headquarters. The conference will cover areas like high-level UN climate change appointments, implementation, update momentum builds ahead of the Paris Agreement signing ceremony. So they are doing the high-level signing ceremony on the 17th. And this is a big deal. This is a culmination of something that's been ongoing since the year 2000. And here we are 17 years later. This is the Monterey Consensus. This is the G20 Sustainable Development Plan and project has all been rolled into what is now known as the Paris Agreement. Now, if you're not familiar with all of those, these are major economic changes that were coming to the world to rebalance currencies, to make trade fairer for nations, to stabilize exchange rates, etc., and to redistribute wealth to the people. Because there's been a problem for centuries. And what that is, you have a very small amount of people who control the wealth, and they make these vast fortunes, and they keep it. They stick it in their family. They buy islands. They have, like a dozen houses, car collections, lavish lifestyles, maids, security, whatever. And they and their rich friends keep the money while the rest of the nations sometimes don't do so well. And what happened, you had people who for a long time have been trying to rectify this and change it. And what we've come up with through the Paris Agreement, which has been the work of the Monterey Consensus, the G20 debt solution, on and on. It's had different names and it's morphed over the years. And let me point out, this started long before the year 2000. The Monterey Consensus, they had been working on that for a long time. Anyway, what we see with the Paris Agreement and these changes that are about to happen is there are new rules. There's new financial rules. They're going to be putting out these instruments that will be used by sovereign nations and be used by corporations, some individuals, hedge funds, etc. And it's based on what they call green finance or sustainable finance. And these green financing bonds and investments have rules to them. They will not be able to, hedge funds and sovereigns will not be able to go in and do these high frequency trading things and make billions and billions and billions of dollars and just take all the money off the table anymore. There are rules to this. And within these green financing rules that they're about to ratify, what they have done is they have made some basic things to these. These are going to be some very high revenue generating monetary tools and instruments for the nations and corporations, hedge funds, etc. But no longer will they be able to take all the money off the table and say, oh, thank you for making me even a richer billionaire. There are rules. And some of these rules are like a certain percentage of the profit, which is a very large percentage, must be used for projects that would help people. Humanitarian projects around the world, infrastructure projects, social projects. So no longer can corporations or individuals or families take these massive amounts of wealth off the table from these investments and stick them in their private, little estates they have all around the world and their trust funds. They actually have to leave the money on the table, and these have to go into approved projects. And it'll be like rebuilding roads, rebuilding bridges, doing community centers, projects that create jobs, things that are sustainable and green finance. There will be grant money for people who want to start businesses. The money is going to go back into the community to improve the lives of the citizens. Now, you may have noticed some of the strangeness going on. We've been talking about the theatrics of what we're seeing in the world right now. You know, I was telling you that it looks like they're going to do this entire theatrical thing to make it look like the dollar has failed. And that may sound pretty scary. But if you're protected in a certain way, it can be okay. And it'll be sustainable. And it has to happen. It has to happen. It's not a bad thing. They've talked about it. They planned it. And they're going to do it. Because the dollar is totally propped up. And we are so far in debt that we can't fix it. It's almost impossible. Now, like I was saying, Congress comes back here in the United States on the 24th from vacation. And that's on a Monday. And that Friday, we have the debt ceiling we're going to hit. So if they don't do something in those 5 days, the United States government's going to have to shut down. And it's been said that they're going to push it, and they're not going to extend this debt ceiling. And I can see this. You combine that with some military theatrics, if you will, and that would give the excuse and the reasoning for all minds who would be observing to understand why the dollar was failing. But it's going to be replaced with something different, and there's going to be a new system. Now, we're running out of money. The U.S. is in very dire state with our debt. Okay, almost $21 trillion. Now, as you know, they're not really talking about this, but you hear the President of the United States, Trump, talking about his infrastructure plan. $1 trillion. $1 trillion of investment into infrastructure. He wants to rebuild roads. He wants to rebuild bridges. He wants to do all these things to improve the infrastructure of the United States. He's met with all kinds of people. He's talked to the Chinese about it, high-speed trains, all these things to totally rebuild this country. But there's a problem. We're broke. We're broke. And we're in debt, almost $21 trillion. So how's this going to happen? People have asked him about this. He said, most of the money will come from the private sector. Nobody asked the hard question. Okay, who? Now, this isn't a new plan. Obama talked about this. And you remember, if you're a listener of Phoenix Rising Radio, during the Obama administration, you knew we talked about his infrastructure bank. The famous Obama infrastructure bank. He had staff for it. It was all set up. And they tried to introduce this thing and bring it into the public mind a couple times. And it was going to be this huge bank that's going to be set up to rebuild all the infrastructure of the country. And Obama also said the money would come from private sources. And he was questioned a couple times by reporters. They're like, well, what do you mean? Who are these people? And he said millionaires. And the next question would be, who? What millionaires are going to do this? And they would drop the subject. And it never took off. You never saw Obama's infrastructure bank, right? But guess what? Trump is moving along the same direction. This has been in the works. And this is where this Paris Agreement comes in. This is where the signing and the agreement of this with all the nations and the carbon credits and these carbon taxes and these global taxes and all these things are coming into play. They are setting up the new infrastructure, economic infrastructure on a global level to sustain this and to do this. So there's going to be some changes. There's going to be some economic changes. And it may appear, if you're living in North America, and maybe even other countries, I mean, my God, look what's happening in Venezuela right now. It may appear like the wheels have fallen off the bus, but you can't let yourself get fearful. Can't. When you see this stuff coming down the pike, and if we see these very things unfold the way I think we will, don't be afraid. Don't be fearful. You can protect yourself in a certain way. There's things that you can do. You know, you hear a lot of people talk about precious metals. And as you know, we don't give investment advice. We never have. We never will on Phoenix Rising Radio. But a lot of people talk about precious metals, gold and silver, as a store of wealth. That could be a hedge against inflation, hedge against failure of the dollar, and a way to retain wealth. There's going to be some bumpy times, but the other side will be better. And that's what you got to remember. If we get into a situation where it looks like we are in great military peril and things aren't going the way exactly you thought they would go, you got to stay brave. You have to stay calm, and you have to stay grounded in all of this. And the best way you can do this, to be at peace with all of this, is to take some control of your own personal life and your own personal space. And the best way you can do that is to make sure that your needs are met. You know, we talk about emergencies, disasters, etc. You just want to make sure if things get kind of wonky and supplies are cut a little bit, that you have your needs met. You can provide shelter, food, water, drinks, medicines for yourself for an extended period of time. Now, nobody can prepare for everything. It's impossible. And you can't prepare to ride it out alone forever. It's just impractical, you know, and it's very expensive, and it's just not really doable. And it's not really necessary. But what is necessary is that you are prepared to the point that you are self-sustaining and self-sufficient for as long as you can be. Because whenever there is a disruption, you don't want to be part of the problem. You want to be part of the solution, right? And being part of the solution sometimes isn't like going out and doing things and solving things. It's sometimes being part of the solution is just not adding to the problem. You know, you've heard me say this before. If there's an emergency or a situation where there's a supply disruption, the one place you do not want to be is standing in a line somewhere with your hand out, waiting for your block of cheese or whatever they're going to give you. You don't want to be there. Yeah, sometimes it's necessary. Things happen and people get into these situations, but I'm telling you, you don't want to be there. You want to do your best to be as self-sufficient as you can. And that will give you a feeling of self-control, that you have some control in the situation that may appear on the surface to be spinning out of control. But you got to remember, they are masters at spreading fear. Masters. Through the media. And most people are trusting good souls, and they will believe everything that they see on TV or hear on the radio. And I want to remind everyone of something called Project Mockingbird. Project Mockingbird, if you look it up, just do a Google on it, you will find that it was a project put forward by the CIA that was extremely successful to infiltrate and take over all the media in the United States. All the media in the United States. And they were very successful with that. And during the Gulf War and different times, and even now, I mean, they were very proud to say the United States military had embedded psychological operations personnel, officers, and operatives with every major news media in the United States. And why did they do that? Because they would write the stories. They would approve the stories. They would put them out. The United States media is controlled by the government in a big way, and has been, and the deep state. So you want to take the mainstream media with a great grain of salt. I mean, we can see this, and we know this, and we've caught them time after time again, giving a narrative that turned out to not be true. And they do this for a reason. They do this to emotionally control people, to get people to back actions of a government. And, they'll do it with images of children or, these buzzwords, and they're very good at it. I mean, it's an art form. It truly is. It's a psychological art form. And they do a very good job at this. So what I'm trying to say is you cannot allow yourself to be taken up in a potentially fearful thing, because you're going to see some things in these coming days. And as things intensify, you may see some things that might be very scary if you allow them to be. They're going to talk about some crazy things. They may report some crazy things, and they may try to create a situation in the psyche of the American public where the American public thinks they're on the verge of catastrophe, that all could be lost, and that your life is in great danger. Our way of life is in great danger. And they do this. This is the whole part of getting people. This is how the few control the many. And I've seen this, how they control the narrative and they take things over. It's more prevalent than you realize. And they will come in, they'll take control of situations, they'll clean situations up and not let the word out, and change the narrative on things to make it fit. Now, many of you have seen the famous footage of World Trade Center 7. Remember that building that fell? It's like a day after the Twin Towers fell or something. And you'll remember, you may have seen the BBC broadcast where they had a BBC reporter, and she was reporting breaking news to the BBC that World Trade Center number 7 had collapsed. And it had collapsed because of the structural fire and all this. But what happened in this famous clip is, as she was broadcasting live, World Trade Center number 7 could be seen behind her, like 3-4 blocks away. I mean, it was a little further, like 5 blocks, but you could see it. And while she was reporting, doing the news report, that she had been told that the building fell, it fell right then. They caught it on camera coming down. It just pancaked down, like they pulled it, like a demolition, which people say is exactly what happened, and the building fell. But she was actually reporting live on the BBC. She had been given the information from the officials there in New York that World Trade Center number 7 had collapsed. And she was reporting all about it, and you could see it right there standing. And again, like a minute into the broadcast, it fell. And they caught it on film. Yeah, you can Google that one too. You can find that footage. But that's a very excellent example of how they control the narrative. So we're getting into a situation now that perhaps, just perhaps, Donald Trump may have been trumped a little bit. Some people are saying his demeanor has changed. Things have changed. Some things are happening. We see John McCain, man, he's back in the news, blah, 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 bomb Iran, do this. I mean, these guys are slathering for World War III. They want battle so bad. They want warfare. The military-industrial complex, they want warfare. They want this economic machine going, because there is a faction that does not want the U.S. dollar to go away. They want it to remain, even though it'll be replaced with something better. They want the status quo to stay. And the only way they can keep the status quo is by breaking the BRICS alliance. And the BRICS alliance, as you know, is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the BRICS nations. And they, of course, have the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which the United States is not part of, but Trump may join, and all the other structures that they set up. Basically replicated the global economic system that was in existence with the World Bank and the Bank of International Settlements and all of this. They have their own system set up. And this is such a threat to the U.S. dollar and the use of the global petrodollar, which has failed, that the only way that they can get around this is by breaking that alliance. And the only way they can break that alliance is to go after one of its primary members. And the two biggest members there, China and Russia. China and Russia. And that's why they want this war so bad, because they know that if Russia goes down, if Russia is defeated in warfare, the BRICS alliance will fail, and the U.S. dollar could possibly stay in power. Anyway.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
No hate, no hype, no fear. Real people, real radio.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Yeah, everybody look what's going down. You know, many of you have seen some of the famous footage from General Wesley Clark. General Wesley Clark. If you're not familiar with that, you can search it. And he was very prolific. He went out and spoke a lot after he left the military. And the high-ranking general in the United States military. And he was leaving. He left service before we really attacked Iran. And this was before 9/11, actually. He got a memo. He was actually privy. He was at the Pentagon, and someone he knew there said, you know, they handed him a paper and said, look, we're going to attack 5 nations. He goes, what? He goes, yeah, we're going to attack Iraq. And General Clark's like, what? Why are we going to attack Iraq? The guy said, I have no idea. But they had a list of 5 nations that they were going to attack. They wanted to do it in 5 years. They wanted to take Iraq, Syria, Iran, Lebanon, and, I can't think of the 5th one. It was Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Iran. I can't think of the 5th one. But they wanted to take these Middle Eastern nations, maybe it was Yemen, and totally destabilize them, because they said they had a chance. The Soviet Union had dissolved, and the Soviet influence of these nations wasn't there. And before they could regain their strength, Russia, I just had a very, Leg just told me she thinks it was Yemen, and I believe she's right. It was Yemen was the other nation. And look what's happening there right now. And they wanted to totally destabilize all of these. Oh, someone said Ukraine. No, it wasn't Ukraine. But that's ongoing right now, too. Oh, by the way, an update on Ukraine. I was watching some of the action there. The Ukrainian forces are shelling a western part of Donbass heavy right now with mortars and heavy artillery. Total violation of the Minsk agreement. And they didn't pull away in their heavy weapons, and they're hitting them heavy. So this whole thing with Syria, it fits into this scenario. We have a deep state cabal that's pushing for this stuff behind the scenes. There's like a battle going on right now. And, well, literally a battle. But here's the issue. I'm not sure that Russia is going to let Syria go that way without a fight. Because when they went into Libya and took Libya out, you know, Putin got in a lot of trouble at home, because Libya had been a long-time ally with Russia. A lot of Russians worked in Libya, vacationed there, and they were allies. And whenever they agreed to the no-fly zone, and the no-fly zone was actually used as a bombing run for the rebels to advance on the Libyan forces and eventually capture Muammar Gaddafi and kill him, murder him on film. the Russian people really were upset with Putin because they could not believe that Russia stood by as one of their allies was destroyed like that. So I'm not so sure he's going to let it go in Syria. And we have some high-ranking generals and people, talking some pretty harsh words right now towards towards Russia. So I'm not sure. But just be advised, a lot of this could be pure theatrics. But they use, these theatrics use live bullets. They are not without major consequence. These pageants that they do are with real planes, real bullets, real bombs to get the effects that they want. So what I'm trying to get at here is we're going to watch this stuff closely. It's really heating up with North Korea, and potentially we could get into a situation where we could have an electromagnetic pulse event. And if you're not familiar with an EMP is a weapon that was developed and it's been tested. And what it is, they discovered a long time ago during testing of all the nuclear testing that if you detonate a certain yield of nuclear weapon at high altitude, the resulting effect is that it will blast electromagnetic pulse that will basically fry any modern electronics. Anything with computer chip in it, it basically cooks it. And it wipes out all electronics. It also shorts out transformers and any basic electrical thing. It can fry them. Now, this is a phenomena that has been observed in nature also that's known as the Carrington event, which was observed by a scientist by the name of Carrington. And this happened back in the 1800s when the sun actually put out a large charge, a plasma discharge towards the Earth, which happens sometimes, and it got through our electromagnetic shields that we have around the Earth, and actually came through. And this electrical charge, which is the same electrical charge that causes the northern lights, this charge came down toward almost all the way to the equator and fried electronics. Bad. And there weren't a lot of electronics in the 1800s, but what they had electronic were the telegraph cables. And it actually melted telegraph lines. It killed one person, I think, who was a telegraph operator, and also caught many telegraph stations on fire. Caught some of the poles on fire too. And the northern lights were so active that all the way down in the southern states, they were so bright you could read a newspaper at night. And this electromagnetic event, which came from nature, was called the Carrington event. I just saw something. Lucky says, she says her brother is going in surgery tomorrow. Oh, Lucky. We're sorry to hear that. Lucky's a host here on TFR, and we hope your brother will be fine. I just caught that over in the chat room. That's the thing about TFR chat room. You can find all kinds of interesting things that are happening over there. And you can find that by going to truthfrequencyradio.com and join the live chat. And you can see everybody over there and make friends with people all around the world. And you never know. Some of the images sometimes are so distracting. It just kind of blows my mind. It's funny stuff, educating stuff, just all kinds of good stuff. Anyway, thanks to everybody in the chat room. But back to the point at hand. What I'm saying is that we could potentially see the use of something like that, and it might not even be a real EMP. It could be coordinated shutting down of the grid to simulate an EMP. But see, here's the thing about electromagnetic pulse. There's some speculation that North Korea has EMP weapons. And the reason for that is because most of the nuclear tests that they have done are of a lower yield. But these lower yield weapons are the proper yield of an electromagnetic pulse device. And they have 2 satellites up right now that are on polar orbit that fly from the North Pole to the South Pole around like that, cross over the United States every 90 minutes. And they have so for a few years. And some people have speculated, perhaps, just perhaps, they could have one of these EMP weapons in them. I don't know. But what they can do is with a small missile from like a ship, they could launch one of these. Or other nations could too. Even terrorist nations. Terrorist forces could do one of these. And it could do a lot of damage to our electrical grid. There's been some speculation that our grid could be down for a long time. Now think about that. What if you lost electricity in 6 months? How would you be? How would things be? There was a book, I can't remember who it was written by, it's called 1 Second After. And this book was actually given to all the members of Congress. And the fellow who wrote this book, let me see if I can find it real quick. I actually listened to the audio version of this. Very troubling. Yeah, here we go. 1 Second After. This was written by, who's the author? William R. Forster. Yeah, New York Times best-selling author. Tells a story that might be all too terrifyingly real, a story in which one man struggles to save his family in a small North Carolina town after America loses a war that sends our nation back to the dark ages. A war lost because of a terrifying weapon, an electromagnetic pulse, EMP, and it may already be in the hands of our enemies. And it is. And basically, if you never read this book, 1 Second After, he's having a birthday party for his daughter, and he's a retired military guy in the book. It's fiction. And everything just stops. Radio stops. TV stops. He's trying to find out what's happening. The lights don't work. Thinks maybe there's been an accident somewhere. He goes to get in his car, and his car doesn't work. And it's been theorized and speculated, and even some tests, that the new modern cars that we have during an electromagnetic pulse event fry the electronics. Because all new cars have electronic ignition. They have all these computer chips in them. Chips all over them, you know. The computer, the brain of the car. And it's said that only very older vehicles, post 1970 would run. And of course, horses would be okay. Horses and buggies, they would work. But, this is just something to think about. And not just North America, this could happen anywhere. And it doesn't have to be an act of war or terrorism. It could be a natural event. They speculate that if we had a returning Carrington type event, it would devastate a large part of the world. Because think how tied in we are to electricity, refrigeration, the electricity that fuels, that runs the fuel pumps at gas stations. Our entire just-in-time delivery system would be in great peril. And one reason for that is everything's done by computer. Everything. I was at a local store recently, and I was looking for an item. I said, there was only one. I needed like a couple of them. I said, are you going to get more of these in? The lady said, we have no idea. I said, well, you don't know if you're going to order more? She goes, we don't order anything. It's all done by computer. She says the main store, the main corporate headquarters, everything that's sold, goes through the scanner. That goes to a central database. That central database decides what needs to happen. It clicks up alerts. And a lot of the ordering is almost done like by an artificial intelligence. And sometimes the availability is there, sometimes it's not. And they don't even know. They don't order the stuff, it just comes to them. And it's all done by computer. All of that would be lost. All of that would be lost. And that's the same way with a lot of gas stations, too. The fuel, it's all, all computer based. Everything is. So could you imagine if all the computers were wiped out? What about your bank account? Got any electronics going on there? Oh yeah, that's right. Everything. It's all. Most people don't even write checks anymore. They use the debit card, credit cards, and they check their balance online. They go to the ATM. So power interruption could be a very disruptive event. They estimate in some of the studies that if indeed we had an electromagnetic pulse event or a Carrington type event, either man-made or natural, that potentially in 1 year, 90% of the population of the United States. That sounds like an incredibly high number, but the reasoning behind that, they say, if we were without power for an entire year, it would be a lot of people that wouldn't be able to get their medications. And you know how many people, if just the medications were shut off, would be in trouble? A lot of people, man, if they don't have their pills, they're going to go into serious health consequences and could potentially die. Insulin needs refrigeration and all types of other things. Now, some medications also that are in our just-in-time delivery system aren't sustaining people's lives. But what they've done, they've created a situation that if people go off of these medications quickly, it can kill them. Or they can have other bad effects. A lot of the antidepressant type things and people use for anxiety that are way overly prescribed, there's a little disclaimer there, and a lot of people don't pay any attention to it because they don't even think about it. But if you are to suddenly go off of these things, you can have a seizure and die. You can't be driving your car. I mean, you go off these medications and you're out driving your car, that could end up very badly because you could go into a seizure. So they're saying the lack of medication would cause a lot of deaths, some of them very close in. And then, of course, disease that would set in because of sanitation problems, starvation because of the lack of food. Then you have violence because people will be acting out, and the 3-day effect that we've talked about before, which I'll touch upon in a minute, will kick in, and the problems with that. And exposure, people would die from exposure, getting too cold or too hot, environmental reasons. And also through disease. I think I said that. Yeah, disease because of lack of hygiene and things like that. So a lot of things could lead to this high death count. But the violent part, we've talked about this before, what's called the 3-day effect. There's an interesting thing that happens during an emergency. Okay, let's say the power goes out, a hurricane or whatever. The first day, people basically stay at home. They're trying to get information. They wonder what's going on. They don't venture out much, maybe a little bit. Day 2, people start going out more. What's going on? Have you heard anything? What's happening? And day 2, that's when people start communicating a little more. And like, hey, I haven't talked to this person down the street for, 3 years. What about the elderly woman who lives over here? Should we check on her? People start reaching out to their neighbors, and that's when people are like, well, the freezer's not working. We might as well cook it. And that's when people start having cookouts. You have neighbors talking, meeting for the first time, and they're cooking stuff and they're doing things. It becomes almost like a little party atmosphere. People talk. And what happens psychologically, people get some hope, like, oh, yeah, probably tomorrow everything will be better. Power will come back on. I'm hearing this. I'm hearing that. And if nothing has changed, we get into day 3. Oh, yeah, day 3. We go from like the drum circles and neighborhood cookouts of day 2. We go into day 3 because what happens in the 3rd day, a lot of people are running out of things, especially water. Their patience is starting to get to them, and they wake up and it's like, what? Things really haven't changed yet. And that's when people start getting weird on day 3, the day 3 effect. That's whenever you start hearing like random gunshots, like what was that sound? That's when people start hearing strange sounds and people knocking on their doors in the middle of the night. That happened in Hurricane Sandy. People in Hurricane Sandy were flipped out because what happened after some time, people started going around like looting. That's when the looting starts after day 3. And so then you have the violence that picks up. And I'm not trying to frighten anybody. This is the reality of it. This is the human psychology part of this. And that can lead to some bad situations you have to be aware of. So what I'm just saying, I think my entire point I'm trying to get at this evening, we didn't cover a lot of the big news. You can hear that anywhere. The major points are we're on the verge of some big warfare. And this big warfare could lead to some situations that would affect us here at home. Here in North America, United States, we've been pretty insulated from this stuff, man. The last time we had real problems here was the Civil War. That was bad. Oh my gosh, that is bad. But it's so long ago. I mean, people don't even have grandparents who can tell them about the consequences of that. I mean, those times are long gone, and they're long gone from the memories, the horrific events that happened from the memories of the collective, other than historians. The other wars we faced, Korean War, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War, all of these were off our shores. Very little incidents ever happened here in the continental United States. 9/11 was probably like one of the most violent things that happened. And that shocked a lot of people, but that was very localized. This time, what they're about to do, this isn't going to be a TV war. Let me put it that way. So we could potentially see some strange things. Some of it may not be true. That's the other thing I'm trying to stress is don't be taken by news media reports. There will be other forms of intelligence or news that get around through CBs, ham radios of what's really going on, firsthand accounts, etc. But you don't be caught up in fearful things. A good read is 1984 by George Orwell. If you've never read that book or you have seen the movie, I encourage you to do so. The perpetual state of war that they were always in, and the Ministry of Truth, which was the Ministry of Propaganda, they would put this stuff out. It was like fiction, but it was used to psychologically control the population, to make them fearful, to make them patriotic, whatever. I think what we need to do as a collective, as individuals, is just to know that you'll be okay. And the best way to know that you'll be okay is to have some preps, to make sure you have some extra food, buy a extra can of this or whatever. Make sure you have the medications you need, have your preparations. Be a prepper. Have stuff. Have some extra water. And a good way, I wrote a book called Have a Plan and Plan to Act by Phoenix Rising. You can find it on Amazon.com. Wrote that back in 2011, I believe. It was 2011, which is basically an instruction manual on how to develop a plan. Doesn't go into the details of all the stuff because those are out there, and it's all individually different. What I would need is different from what you would need. What you would need is different from what your neighbor would need. Everybody's slightly different. There's some basic things we all need, but your individual situation will dictate exactly how you would prepare and how you would get your stuff together. But, I'm encouraging everyone to make sure that your preps are good, that if you need to, check them out. And if you do have some preparations and things, you got to go through them occasionally. Pop open the can, take a look, see what things look like. because things will rust, things will mildew, things will go bad. You have to make sure things are good. Check your batteries, check your stuff. And a good way to do this is, well, if you can get the book, have a plan to act, or just do some basic questions. What would you do right now? Boom, if the power went out. Right now. Right now, while you're listening to this, bang, power's out. Do you have a way to see? Do you have candles? Do you have alternative light? Can you stay warm? Can you stay cool? Will you eat tomorrow? You just ask yourself these basic questions. Anyway, again, not to frighten anyone, but to give people encouragement, to give people strength, to give people fortitude, to know that you'll be okay, that you can rise above any situation, and that you can live a happy and victorious life during tumultuous times, because we may see some tumultuous times coming up here, because that's the direction we're seeing all this stuff go into, and it may intensify. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Know that you'll be okay. Anyway, we've had out of time. Thank you for listening this evening. Don't forget, on Thursday of this week, we'll be joined by Alex Whiteplume, be myself and Ney Say. And Alex Whiteplume is a Native American gentleman who has been on the forefront of trying to help the different reservations set up a sustainable operation of growing cannabis for economic reasons to help the tribes. Anyway, so that should be a fascinating show. A lot of legal things and all that. And we'll cover a few other things before Alex comes on, because I think we'll probably be on for like 30 minutes before he comes in. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for listening this evening. Thank you for supporting TFR and iHeartRadio. And one important thing, find someone to love and tell them that you love them. So important. So important. Anyway, we're out of here. We will see you guys on Thursday. Thank you. Good night. And God bless.